Welcome everyone to this post-meantime conversation. I'd like to put it into context because this is actually the beginning of a second block of Mike's films, and we haven't really done them chronologically. We've done a series of films. We started with a series of films which centre on the family. And now we're starting with a film that centres on a family. So what's the difference? But I'll get to that. So chronologically, we're 13 years after your feature film debut, is that right? I think 12 or 13 years. And this isn't really, technically speaking, a feature film, Meantime, is it?
No, it's not. This film was the third Channel 4 film, the new channel. The producer and I, Graham Benson, and asked David Rose, who was in charge of film, whether we could do it as a feature film on 35mm, and the answer was, we're not there yet. Next year we're hoping to start doing that, because as you know, once that started to happen, given the remit of Channel 4 was and remains to host independent productions, it completely revolutionised the British serious indigenous independent film scene, and lots of great films were made. So this was a sort of just two or three films, several films happened before that became theatrical films. So it was a television film. It's had an odd history. It sank without trace because it was just on television, and there was no, you couldn't get it on any sort of commercial VHS for a long time. But over a number of years, I would get letters on a fairly regular basis from people who would say, I've seen you, because it circulated underground as an underground thing, where people had copies that they'd recorded off air. And, letters saying, I'm unemployed. And this film really speaks to me, that kind of stuff, which was very gratifying. But I never thought it would survive in the way that it has. It went through various editions on VHS and DVD. And now it's in the Criterion collection in New York. And it has been shown as a film. And gradually it's kind of slunk into being what is erroneously but delightfully regarded as a feature film.
Yeah, and it's a kind of canonical Mike Leigh film in that sense, because it's in your the box set DVD feature films. It's not in the other box set is the BBC films.
Yes,
it can't be in that.
Absolutely.
So
there's another aspect to this which I think is perhaps for those that are interested in in film matters, which is this. Although this is from my point of view, although it was a television film, for me it was a new and refreshing experience because, yes, it was shot on 16mm, etc., etc., but all the films I'd made over the previous 12 years or so, apart from Bleak Moments, the original feature film, which was very much a low-budget affair with a tiny crew, etc., etc., they'd all been films made for BBC television. which meant that, you were working with very good crews, film crews, but guys who would be doing other things, including, farming programs and things up to the previous week. And then they'd show up and say, fine, what are we shooting? And all that. So there wasn't, we didn't operate, although it was very professional and there were some very talented people involved, including some distinguished cinematographers, it was within the BBC discipline. Because Meantime was an independent film, although it wasn't, in the sense that we've been talking about, going to be a feature film, it was shot, we had the scope and the quality. It was shot by the great cinematographer Roger Pratt, who would subsequently shoot High Hopes. And what was unique was that he was able to be around and for us to talk about the feel, the look, the spirit of the film, for him to shoot tests and that kind of thing, which I hadn't experienced previously. And the quality, the actual crew was very much a feature film crew. So it was made to a much higher standard, in a way, than my television films, although it was a television film.
And you've been wont to talk about it, Meantime, as the first of a kind of trilogy of films, with its successor 4 Days in July, and then your kind of next official feature, which is High Hopes. Could you talk about, I mean, that's obviously a retrospect because you didn't know the other two were going to come. But...
No, I've said that they are a sort of political trilogy, which is more, as you say, more of a reflection on the films retrospectively and seeing that that's what I'd done, rather than I certainly didn't think, now I'm going to make a trilogy. And in fact, they're quite different from each other. 4 Days in July, for those that don't know, it is the last play for today film I made for the BBC, which is about set in Northern Ireland, and it really is a way of looking at the Troubles. And High Hopes is a reflection on how to actually live what you believe in. The genesis of this film, shall I talk about that?
Yeah, I was going to say, just going to ask, really, that although obviously you couldn't have known what was ahead, nonetheless there was, I presume, a political impetus.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's obvious from what the film is that, there are first two things, really. One, very idiosyncratic private thing, which I was making a film previous to this, Home Sweet Home, for the BBC, which we were shooting in Hitchin in Hertfordshire. And I was staying in a very basic apartment somewhere in the middle of nowhere outside Hitchin, in the Bedfordshire barren landscape. And we were shooting, and very early in the morning I was in the bath listening to the radio, and there was a story about two lads in Warrington, Lancashire, who committed suicide because they were unemployed and they were profoundly depressed. And that sort of sat as a kind of notion. Now, obviously, this isn't that film, and it isn't about that. But somewhere in there, that was the genesis of this film. Notwithstanding that it isn't, I don't obviously do it literally. But then, of course, the other thing was that this was 4 years into Thatcher's regime, and the whole matter of unemployment was getting extremely serious. And the government actually, Thatcher's government introduced these very bogus schemes which affected to deal with the unemployment situation, but absolutely didn't, because, you know, anyone that took up these schemes only got sort of 3 weeks out of it, and then it was over, basically. So somewhere in there, in Auntie Barbara's generosity, is that notion. But again, you may take that with a pinch of salt. These are things that help one to kind of get the ball rolling, and one idea leads to another, and so on.
Yeah, I mean,
but the general, it goes without saying, and it's too obvious to say, I guess. But the general, the zeitgeist, the general depression about unemployment, in a way that's not dissimilar to the general depression about the state of things now, was unavoidable, and that really was the driving, motivating, what motivated this film, really.
To me, you know, I'm always looking for hints about how you put these things together, and as you go along, I know it's easy to see that it's about, or it centres around two sets of siblings, and because the brothers are so close physically together, sharing that bedroom, it's easy to forget, as I had, that the two sisters are also at the centre of this, Mavis and Barbara, and their life chances and the different roads that they took. So that was a kind of a gift as a structural device, which you make very good use of.
Good. Well, yes, I mean, I don't know what to say about that. It's true, and that is, there is that.
Yeah. I mean, do you want to, because using the idea of, or inspired by the difficulty with unemployment and the bogus schemes and all those kind of things, how did the characters like Coxey and the Haley, how did they emerge?
Well, I mean, you know, obviously I felt the need to have a portrait of some young people in this depressed world, you know. So I pulled in various young actors and developed that.
Yeah, it's a classic of an eye for talent, isn't it?
Just to go back, because let's go back to what you failed to get me to talk about. I mean, I suppose, apart from anything else, just going back to the family dynamics in the film, I mean, the central character who has an upwardly mobile sibling, or who is upwardly mobile and has an unupwardly mobile sibling. That's a running theme through, it happens in a lot of my films. Mm-hmm. And at some peculiar level, there's probably something subconsciously autobiographical about that to some degree. But, I mean, obviously you get it, well, I won't list them, it's in a whole bunch of the films. In a way, I think when Barbara, towards the end of the film, talks to Mark in the kitchen about, I mean, how she worked in the bank. I mean, when Marion Bailey researched that, when we looked at it, one of the things that was made very clear to her is that because she talked about the character, and she went and talked to them in the bank, a couple of banks, and they made it very clear that at that time, for a working girl from a working class background, she would never rise above a certain level of clerk, a bank clerk. So all of that's built into the, and also it's important that, she'd have done A-level economics, which when the pretentious guy comes round from the council, played by the brilliant Peter White, who always delivers the goods. And that was my first time working with him. Her economics comes out, and she argues it out with him, basically. And so that kind of wanting to embrace ideas and wanting to, in that sense, better yourself beyond just the material improvements in her life.
Yeah.
I think is important, really.
Yeah, it's just her hard. I mean, the portrait in just a couple of scenes of her marriage is very powerful.
Yeah, I mean, she's married to a guy with whom she shares that material upward mobility, but actually he's not really. He's really only concerned with the surface stuff. And, at some level, there's some other thing which she's never going to achieve and knows that it's there.
Yeah, and she becomes, because she's aware of her situation in a way that perhaps Mavis is.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Yeah. Her situation, Barbara's situation, becomes more tragic.
Yes. I think the important thing about Mark is precisely that. I mean, Mark will move on. Mm-hmm. Mark will, the reason why, I hate to explain the film you've just seen, but that's why we're here. It's all locked away in this, in this inner London and this suburb. But it was really important to take Mark and put him in Trafalgar Square.
Yeah, it's a great
just to breathe, because he's out there. He's just, out there. Don't know why he's there, what he's doing, but he's there. He's looking at the world, and he will move on. And he has that intelligence, and that's important, really.
Yeah. One of the things that interested me, just in terms of putting something like this together, was that there are two characters who, unusually for you, do not have names. They are the black couple, Hayley's friend who's pregnant, and her boyfriend, who shares that extraordinary scene in the lift with Oldman and Roth. They have that very powerful scene together over the pram, and you make use of the image of the pram, so it's not an insignificant scene, but that's a very self-contained piece of work, and I wondered whether they originally had
No, not at all. And in fact, to tell you with respect, I mean, it's a thing I do a lot here and there in the films. Is, you don't, just to see a glimpse of a life, which is, you see in a very, very three-dimensionally, but you only see as much as you need to. I do it quite a lot, and actually they're not the only characters in my films where you don't know what they're called. And it would be, the thing about telling the audience the names of characters, sometimes it's really fake in films and especially TV dramas. I mean, there is no reason to know what those guys are called, because they're not. You only see them either with each other or with people they don't know. So, but I think it's really important to have those perspectives. I enjoy doing that. I think it's really important. And one of the things that fascinates me walking around all the time, and we all experience this. You walk past somebody in the street and you hear half a sentence completely out of context. And from the half sentence, you know a great deal about the people, you know, and you certainly don't know what they're called or who they are, but you just get you know. And so I think that's important.
And another thing that I think...
and it's important too because you couldn't, I would submit, that you couldn't tell this story without those supporting, without being able to wash in, to sketch in the surrounding world, without us going out of focus and getting too in those perspectives.
Yeah, I mean, another thing you like to do, which is, I know you like, is the beginning, the actual opening shot is very misleading in the nicest possible way, because it's a park and it's all very idyllic and there's some guy somebody running through it, but actually we're not going to go there at all. We're going to be very far from there in an urban estate.
Yes, because as I've talked about in other contexts, other films, yes, it is that thing of starting a film with a bit of a red herring, really. In a way. But you know, they've gone to see Barbara and Old Man, and they've gone for a walk, and they're out there in the park. You know,
but it's a wheeze. And before I open it up, I do want to talk about the estate where you filmed it, because as in All or Nothing, which we much later film, we talked about last week, the environment is a character, especially that whole area around the flats and the balcony and looking down.
And the canal.
And the canal, yeah, I presume that's Homerton, isn't it?
It's Haggerston. It's all the same. That's literally right around the canals next door to those flats. They're just it's on the Kingsland Road. You know.
But was it yet as in All or Nothing? Were you given the run of that?
Oh, absolutely not. No, All or Nothing. We as I said the other day, we had 300 flats, and it was empty. It was going to be demolished, and we had the complete run of it. Not at all. No. And this was we had a flat in this estate, and you know, we
populated. You had their flat, and did you also have Haley's flat as well? So you just had those two places, and the estate office and the labour exchange, they were all...
No, the labour exchange, we created that in the back of the hospital, the name of which I forget, which is on the Kingsland Road. I've forgotten what it's called. It's long since ceased to be a hospital. So we created that. And what was the other thing you mentioned?
The labour exchange and the estate office, where...
no, that was the real estate office.
Oh, guessed as much. Yeah. Good. That's all me.
How about the music?
Oh, Andrew Dixon. Well, somebody can ask about that. I'll tell you what I'll ask about the music. It's great, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean...
It was your first. It was the first one with Andrew.
It was. And it's only two... The attack piano, a piano with drawing pins in the hammers, and the sax. And it was very... some people hated it. It was screened in Australia, and Warren Mitchell, as in Alf Garnett, was in Australia doing something. And he went to see it, and I went for dinner with him. And he said, great film. He said, fucking horrible music, he said. Alf Garnett, you know.
Well, not known for his taste in these things, I expect. No, but I mean...
Nice man.
Yeah. But, questions about Meantime. Questions to Mike about Meantime or related issues.
Thank you. I really enjoyed seeing this film tonight. I hadn't seen it before. I've got two questions. I've got lots, but two questions. Question one, around what was it like? We know the film was made because we've seen it, but what was it like? Were there any obstacles in the commissioning process at the time with Channel 4? So I'd like to hear about that. Also, was this made in 1983? Was this? Yeah. So 1983 Mike Leigh versus 2022 Mike Leigh. Obviously, I hope you're kind to 1983 Mike Leigh, but watching this again, is there anything that you, knowing what you know now, would do differently? I thought it still stands up for what it's worth, and I really enjoyed it, but I'm just interested to know artistically.
Well, first of all, the head of film at the then new channel was David Rose, who came from the BBC and was in fact the head of English regions drama. And I'd worked for him previously when we made Nuts in May and some other stuff. And the deal with my films then and still is that, you know, I don't have a script. I don't talk about what I'm going to do. You either give me the money and I make the film, or you tell me to get lost. And he was very, very enthusiastic that I should be involved in this new project of Channel 4. And so, no, to answer your question, there were no issues about editorial or anything, just encouragement to get out there and do it. In 1983, I was 40. And in 2023, I will be 80. That's my next birthday. So where I was coming from then led to what the film is, and where I am now wouldn't be relevant to the me that made it then. So in answer to your question, no, I wouldn't want to touch it with a barge. I'm very fond of it. I'm very proud of it, and everybody's contribution to it on both sides of the camera. I'm sorry, this is a very soppy sort of answer, but this is the honest answer to your question. And I never really want to tamper with films after. I mean, just to digress for a moment, I like my films, and it's a privilege to be able to say that. Many directors, you know, I know lots of directors, and some people here may know directors too, who, with regards this, that, or the other film, you say, do you ever watch it? No way, I never want to see it again, I hate it. Reason? Because it's not the film they wanted to make, they had to cast who they didn't want to cast, the script was buggered about with, the ending was fucked up by Philistine producers, etc., etc., etc. And it was a bad experience. I've been very, very lucky up to now. More recently, I've had it very difficult to raise the money to make a film, but that's another matter. But every film I've made has made it exactly how I wanted it to be, and therefore I don't have that feeling. That's the answer to your question.
But there's another point about, I would say, this film, High Hopes, Naked, which we're looking at tomorrow, which is that they are absolutely in their time, and they capture the time in a very particular way. I mean, the notion of transferring it to some type of tomorrow.
Yes, I don't think you meant that particularly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, it is. I mean, it is very much, it is where it...
It's what you're saying, Mike. I think a lot of times, you know, if you read a collection of plays, or it's not the same medium, but, you know, as you say, for those reasons, you know, people sort of say, oh, you know.
Sits where it sits.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. And, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. How did you cast that film? And who did you cast first, and did it affect the rest of the cast, you know, the way that you cast it?
Give him the microphone back, because I don't really know what you're asking me.
What I meant was, you chose those actors to do those roles in your film, but each one makes such a contribution to it that, you know, it's like having seen that, and obviously that some of those people, I don't know if it's the first time they were in one of your films. It's the first time they're even in any film. But the contribution of those particular actors, it's very difficult to unpick.
Yes, well, I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, and I hope it's true. It is true. I think that, I mean, they're all very good actors, and we're lucky we have good actors, and I work only with what I would call character actors, which is to say people that don't just play themselves, but can do real people out there in the street, and that's obviously what this bunch of people is about. I don't really know what to say about it, really, other than the fact that we got a good ensemble of people, and we're able to really plunge the depths with them, and quite a number of them. I think, I don't know who I worked with before, actually. Marion, yeah. But that's academic in a way, because once you work with somebody, then it becomes unimportant as to whether it's the first time or not. Really.
But I suppose it raises the issue of roles, because actually when the actors come together for their first meeting, there aren't any roles.
No, that's true. We create the characters, and as with all of my films, I mean, I collaborate with the actors, with each actor, to create a character, and I put them together, and a world comes out of that. Yeah, that's true. Yes.
So they're kind of indissoluble from those.
Yes,
roles
but I always get actors to draw on people that they have known in real life to make the characters. I don't know what else to say about it, really. But what's motivating your question is obviously that you find what they're doing, I hope, believable and resonant and three-dimensional. That's would be right?
Yeah, I mean, little scenes like when Gary Oldman
Coxey.
When Coxey skips along that kind of bit of wall, and the Tim Roth character Colin is following him, and the subtle differences in the way they do it.
Well, because they're in character, and they're simply doing.
Yeah.
We've created these characters in a very thorough way, and once you've done that, you can take them anywhere and improvise and explore and build scenes, and that's what they're doing basically. But that applies to every moment in the film. To be honest.
Thank you. And yes, I can see a hand going up at the back, but I can only see the hand. Thank you. Cheers.
Hello. There is a voice attached to the hand, I assure you. Thank you for the film. I was interesting you saying there was a similarity in how terrible things are now as how terrible things are then. I certainly felt a resonance from it to today. But something I found quite curious about the film is there's a sort of antenatal or even non-sexual impotent feeling to the film. None of the relationships are consummated in any meaningful way. There's of course that shot of the empty pram trailing away, and of course the inciting incident of many, but the thing that happens to Tim Roth's character before he becomes a skinhead is he fails to make that connection with his sweetheart. And something else I noticed about the film is, the city is described as being 12 miles away, somewhere where the earth is. You can't see it. So there's very much a feeling, which is, if it's in Haggerston, the city is a lot closer than that, but there's a feeling of the characters being completely alienated from the political processes and what they can affect in their lives in terms of change or a way of getting out of their situation. I suppose my question is, did that impotence come from the malaise that was gripping the country, or was it just that it wasn't important to show the relationships between them being meaningful in terms of intergender dynamics?
I'm just quite. When you say, you mean meaningful?
Well, I mean, not brought to a satisfactory
Well, I mean, the film is about frustration. The film is about alienation. The film is about, have-nots. The film is about the distance. I mean, as you say, you can walk from Haggerston to Westminster, but it's 1 million miles away. And when they say the city is 12 miles away, that's because it is 12 miles away from the suburbs. But as to your very interesting question about impotence, and what you're really saying is, I mean, you're not being as crude as this, but you're saying, why isn't there any sex? I mean, it's a film about frustration. It's a film about unfulfillment, and a film about also, therefore, by implication, about hopes and aspirations, however subconscious or frustrated they may be. That's what the film's about.
If I could possibly double dip, what's interesting to me about that answer is the only character who seems to be offering a sort of solidaristic alternative is the wanker with the scarf from the council estate, who's talking about ants and all of this that means nothing to anyone. Why is it that in that have-not atmosphere you didn't create relationships between the characters so they could bring themselves up aside from the brothers?
With respect, you're asking for a different film.
Yeah.
In a word, I mean, the bottom line is, the honest answer to your question is, it would never have occurred to me. Because the spirit of the film is what it is, and it's about the frustrations it's about, and about the lack of fulfillment and the disappointments and all of those things. And unless I misunderstand you, it would sound as though you're asking for a different film. Is that fair?
I think it's more, I'm trying to relate it to the terribleness of the current moment, which seems rather not to be from not having anything, but from having too many jobs, too many connections.
I agree.
Everything is going crazy. Whereas then it's
I agree.
a lack.
When I said earlier on, that it some way resonates with, all I meant was, at this precise moment, there's a great, inevitably, of course, there's a great deal of talk about unemployment and inflation and all the things that are frightening and frustrating people. And that is in some way resonant with the talk about unemployment in 1983, 4 years into Thatcher's reign. That's really the only similarity, but the differences are huge, and you just identified them.
However, thank you very much, because what you've identified from my point of view is why we're starting this second round of films with this film, because I wanted to group films which explore this idea of alienation, and this especially in the characters of Mark, Colin, Coxey, and also Barbara, but not just those, because there are Mavis and Frank and Haley and the couple down the corridor. They are all alienated from themselves and from society in precisely the way that you're talking about, by the overall situation, by a political situation, by a social policy. And we're going to look at the kind of, what can we say, the apotheosis of that, it doesn't seem quite the right word, in Naked tomorrow. So can we have another question? Don't be put off by me. Oh gosh, yes, that gentleman there.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Great.
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
That's because he's in the dark. He's waving.
Hi, Mike. Thank you so much. The film obviously has, the overriding temporality is one of waiting. It's called Meantime, and it seems to take place within a series of intervals. You see people waiting for a pint, waiting for their washing to come out of the dryer. And you've talked about frustrated agency, but yet you also said that you had a sense that Mark was going to escape. And you said it with such confidence that it really took me by surprise, because within the film, there does seem to be a general sense of stasis. And I wondered if you had a sense of where any of the other characters were going, and if any of the others could change their situation in a way that you seem to think Mark will.
Well, with respect, I mean, it's an interesting question, but what you're doing, and I would have to say all you're doing, is to invite me to speculate anew for the first time about what may happen to various of the characters. When I say that Mark, my feeling is that Mark will move on, will escape, I think I would suggest that the evidence is implicitly there in the film. He actually says, I'm going to go. He talks about a woman, and I say, I've already said that I deliberately put him in the outside world to augment that notion. I mean, you don't have to. I wouldn't have thought. I wouldn't have at the time of making the film thought in terms of signalling actual evidence that was going to happen. I think it's implicit. We can speculate about the relationship between Barbara and her old man. We can speculate. I mean, we can debate whether Colin is in any way affected by the traumatic experience he's had, limited though his world is. We can speculate. I mean, I deliberately put Coxey going bonkers in an old builder's barrel that we found lying about in the street. I said to Gary Oldman, just get into that and go mad. And we filmed it. And that, in a way, is a metaphor for his inevitable end or his demise. We can speculate about those things. But my philosophy as a filmmaker is to bring you to the point where the film ends and hand it over to you, really. And there are a lot of untidied or loose ends, if you like, but that's in the nature of the thing, and it's in the nature of these lives. That's all I would say about that, really.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlemen here. The mic awaits you.
So it's the first time that I see a movie where the end is devised and directed. So I know you've talked in the other sessions about your process and some of the secrets, but I was also curious because in this movie I didn't identify something like a climax in the scenario, I would say. So I would say I was surprised that the story develops naturally. So I guess following the device, what you devised. But I was also curious to know how you knew that it will end as it ended with the image of the image of the skinhead, so to speak. Like, he made his choice, and that's how it ends. So there's a sense of hope that he was able to make a choice, but it's not his choice because he was also influenced by Coxey in a way. So that's how I got it. But
well, it's his choice.
Yeah,
he's grasping for something to hang on to, obviously. But what's your question exactly?
So the question is how for this movie the devised process was different from the others or similar, and how you knew that this image, this end, was the moment where you wanted to leave us.
I mean, it doesn't differ from any of the other films in terms. It says devised because in the period when I made television films, I used to put devised and directed by. And then I realised that this was inaccurate, and it was more accurate to put written and directed by. But it's a technicality. So it's the same process. But I don't think you're really asking me about process as such. You're really asking me how one arrives at the conclusion of the story and the imagery that says, well, that is by the same instinct that artists arrive at, as a storyteller. That's what the job is, and that's what felt right, really. I can't really say more about it.
No, that's it. That's perfect.
I mean, it would. This is beyond what you're asking me, but to extend, to put a coda or a comfortable conclusion or a finale onto this film after the moment in the bedroom would seem entirely redundant and would dilute the film. The important thing is that is the moment, which, for better or worse, has its own kind of truth, and that's what's there for you to take away from the thing.
One of the it's curious about the climax thing, because I got a very strong sense of it when Colin turns around and shouts at his parents.
Yeah.
That
is climactic by any standards.
It's still quite a powerful moment for me, and there's a different kind of structural climax. I like structures.
Yeah.
Where Barbara is slumped into the corner of that room with tears.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
And she lays it on the line with her.
Yeah, I took a very early train, and I think my brain was just.
But it was great because you provoke this. There's just one quick thing I want to follow up on that. The final scene in the bedroom. Tim Roth, in an interview, talks very lovingly about that having been something like a 7-hour improvisation that came all the way down.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously conspired that he, as the actor, would go and have his head shaved, and he came back with the thing, and they didn't know, and it went on, and I the only apart from the actors, I sat there with the assistant director, and we sat in the corner. I got cramp, and it went on and on and on, and they still didn't pull the thing. And it was dynamite, really, and that gave us the genesis of the scene.
Yeah, and it's great when Mavis comes in and tries to get him, and she's obviously really upset when she leaves the room.
Absolutely.
It's all great, all that. I think probably one more. Is there one more? Yes, hello, in the front row. There's, I'm sure we can hear you, but for the benefit of everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, great film. I saw it when it first came out, and I'm still stunned by it.
Great.
My question is a little bit more banal than everyone else's, I think.
Oh, good. My answer will be a bit more banal than mine.
Excellent. I'll be able to understand it. For that film, did you go out and choose the actors, or did the actors come to you?
What do you mean, did they come to me?
Well, what I'm saying is, like Gary Oldman, did he come and say, give me a part in?
No. I mean, he was an unknown actor. No, they all, I mean, the process, as always, is that I meet actors, and it's a mutual thing. I invite them to take part. They don't tell me they want to be in it, but it's my job to collect together a cast, and that's what it is. So I chose them, but obviously they wanted to do it, so it was a mutual. If I understand your question.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, you do. So for Gary Oldman, who hadn't been in a film before, what was it about him?
Well, he was obviously a really interesting actor and a character actor. As was the others,
It wasn't quite.
I didn't know he was going to be the mega star and the director, etc., that he is, because you never do know those things,
But Tim Roth also he'd done one film which probably hadn't come out, had it?
No, he made another Channel 4 film called Made in Britain. And indeed, Alan Clark, the director of that film, who I was friendly with, said, "You want to look at this lad? He's really good." So that's where he came from.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to draw us to a close. I'm very grateful. I'm sure we both are to you for coming this evening. See you again, I hope.
Thank you. Good.